Alright, well, some of you guys were asking how I do some of the laser engravings that have paint involved in them. I'm laser engraving over the painted areas. So this is basically my process. Right now I'm using LightBurn software, and here's the image I'm going to use. And let's say the Falcon will be painted in with gray, and I'll mostly have white in the background for the star trails, maybe add a little bit of color here and there. So what I have to do is you can use the pen tool to draw a cut line wherever you want it. So if you zoom in here, you can see the red line I have drawn around the Millennium Falcon. You can see it a little bit better here if I turn off the image. So this is what I have to engrave first. This is just an outline of where I need to stop the gray paint versus the white paint out here. So I run that first on the engraver, which gives me this. Well, after all that, I got excited here and forgot to record after I got it painted. Anyway, you can see how I laid down the gray paint inside the lines there, put the white paint on around the outside, threw a little bit of color in there. So now I'm engraving over the entire thing. And every design's got to be different. You may have to be a little bit more precise about where you're putting the paint. But for instance, if this design had a really thick line around the outside, you're going to be engraving over that anyway. So if you went a little bit outside the lines, it wouldn't matter too much. Okay, so yeah, after almost 3 hours of engraving, this is how far we've gotten. So I decided to abort this because this was going to be after 3 o'clock in the morning before this was finished. Previously I'd used a software called T2 Laser, and it has a feature when doing engravings like this. The areas that are not engraved, it will transfer, it will move quickly between them. Move this slower speed to engrave, move quickly, so on. The software I'm using now, LightBurn, overall is a nicer piece of software, but does not have that feature yet. I greatly underestimated the amount of time this would take. So, I guess good for you guys, you can see the difference now between before and after the engraving on the painted areas. Anyway, that's basically the process. It's nice when you pull it off and actually finish it. Okay, so this is a good example of what I was talking about, how precise you need to be with the paint sometimes. For instance, here, there's a lot of engraving in between these two colors. So, even though I had the outline traced of all these shapes before I put this paint on here, you can overlap that line a little bit, as long as your red didn't go clear over into the green, vice versa. Because your engraving is going to engrave over the line where those two colors meet. And of course, every design's different. Some take a lot more precision with the paint. The teeth on this was horrible. Some of the tiny ones were painted with a toothpick. Now, something else I wanted to mention that makes a fairly big difference, at least with these small diode lasers, is before I had this small fan mounted down here just blowing on the workpiece, mainly to disperse the smoke away a little bit so it didn't collect and dirty the lens of the laser. That works okay, but it doesn't actually extract any kind of material away from the wood, or if you're engraving over the paint, it still stays on the workpiece. Now I have, it's a 60-liter aquarium air pump. Runs down a small nozzle here, very close to the workpiece. A lot more air pressure on it, and it makes a completely different effect during the engraving. Okay, so here's an example of that. The brown areas you see here, those are more typical with the air assist on. It's actually burning away the paint and removing it. Now this is more typical without air assist. All this black area you see was engraved white paint, and it stays black because it's not actually removing any paint or wood. It's basically just burning it and making it black. So you may want to play around with that if you have the ability to turn on and off your air assist. It just depends on what effect you're going after. As you can see, it's quite different. Now again, this is for my small 2.3 watt diode laser. I'm sure this is a lot different if you have a 40, 50, 60 watt CO2 laser.